You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
Tonight I'm talking to Jason Bassler. How are you, Jason, in sunny California?
I'm doing wonderful. Yeah, it's still kind of sunny out, thankfully. I'm loving it.
Yes. Well, you're like, what is it, 5 o'clock there?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So you are the founder of Police the Police. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me on. This is long overdue. I think we've been talking about doing this for 2 years now or something.
Yes,
so.
Pretty much. Yeah.
And so thank you for having me on. Sipping on a beer right now. I hope you have some wine or a cocktail nearby.
I might have one.
I sure hope so. But no, it's an important topic, and it's one that I don't get to talk about a lot. You know, I usually get caught up in the censorship and people just asking me how I got started in all this. So I appreciate talking about, this topic that's obviously important to both of us. I'm certainly not an expert, but I've learned a few things over the years. So
well, I would say that you're an expert. And I actually, it annoys me a little bit that you've been only interviewed about media censorship, which is really important. But what you do day to day is why we became friends. It's because you host one of the largest police accountability pages and sites on the internet, and that is Police the Police. So how did you start that page? What made you start it?
So I've always been interested in activism as far back as I can remember in high school. In my early 20s, I was doing the anti-war protests. But by around 2011 or so, the Occupy Wall Street movement hit. And I realized I didn't have a good grasp of what was going on politically. And I also realized that I had a brand new iPad in my hands, and that, in the age of information, ignorance is a choice, right? So
right.
I basically realized it was very important to kind of understand the political climate, what was going on. And as I was watching a lot of the protests, Occupy Wall Street, I noticed that the police were very heavy-handed. I noticed that they were ruthless to both, the younger protesters, the older protesters, anybody in between. And to me, it just kind of struck me as being off. I'd always kind of had this impression that law enforcement was supposed to work for the people. Of course, I was pretty naive at that point, but at that point, it made me realize that I personally needed to get involved. I needed to do something to try to make some positive change and to, have my foot in the world of police accountability, I guess you could say.
So basically, what does Police the Police do? I know that you have several pages on social media and your own site, but what is your main focus on Police the Police?
So during those first years of watching the Occupy Wall Street movement, when I first started Police the Police, I realized that there was just an endless amount of police brutality stories coming out, and I couldn't keep up with all of them. I wanted to start focusing on one story and kind of honing in on it and really trying to tell that story. And I realized by the time I got invested into that story, there was already something else happening that was almost worse. So I realized that there needed to be a place to archive and document police accountability, police brutality, police misconduct, and police abuse of power. And I was also very inspired and moved by a few of the people that were already doing similar things within the police accountability movement. Of course, at that time, 2012, when I first got started, Black Lives Matter wasn't even around yet. It didn't exist. But there were a few police accountability organizations like Cop Block, like We Cop Watch, Photography is Not a Crime. There was a few others, but I was really inspired by what they were doing. And I saw that they had a social media presence and some good marketing strategies. And I kind of realized that that would be a good path for me to kind of try to do the same thing, but put my own skills towards it and see what I could make of it. And within a very short time, it started to take off. Of course, we partnered up with the people from CopBlock, which helped things. But it was only just a few years, in a matter of time, we were reaching millions of people on a regular basis through our Facebook page and through our website.
Yeah. So I think before you got censored, what was your reach as far as followers?
So we had 1.9 million followers on Police to Police before it got taken down. On a good week, we'd reach up to about 50 million people, sometimes less, sometimes more. I have screenshots of pulling in 40,000 fans in 1 week, So, yeah, we were reaching a lot of people. And before we were taken down, we were the biggest police accountability platform anywhere on the internet, including Reddit and all social media platforms. So when Facebook took us down, it was kind of a disservice to the police accountability movement. Of course, that didn't stop them from a couple of years later parading around Black Lives Matter and acting like they were, social justice warriors helping the cause. But, we remember, I think the OGs remember, the people who've been doing this for long enough remember that it wasn't just us as well. It was CopBlock that got taken down. It was also Filming Cops. It was CopLogic. There was a number of police accountability pages that were taken down during the October 2018 purge.
So let me ask you, Jason. So a lot of people, they might see what you do or whatever. Why do you think that filming cops is important for accountability? Like, what purpose does it serve?
It documents, that's a great question. Yeah, it documents the interaction for all parties involved. So it provides a level of transparency for anybody in the general public to see who was in the wrong, see who the aggressor was, see who initiated the conflict. So yeah, documenting and disseminating any type of information regarding negative police encounters is very important. It also, when we want to talk about things like live streaming, that's probably one of the best options, streaming it straight to your Facebook account. There's also several other apps and social media platforms that let you do that now, but documenting it and putting it in the cloud so it's not able to be deleted by law enforcement if they do get a hold of your property. But yeah, that's some of the most important stuff we could do. And never hesitate to film your own traffic stop, your own interaction with law enforcement, or even if you just see somebody who's having an interaction with law enforcement and it appears to be going sideways, you're absolutely 100% legal, and it's a lawful activity to film police. So by all means, you could save a life. You could potentially get somebody, have their charges dropped if the evidence shows. And more often than not, police will fabricate stories, and a lot of times they'll actually even turn off body cameras or obstruct body cameras. So it's absolutely important to have a third-party witness documenting any type of law enforcement interaction.
It's funny because a lot of people believe that filming the police in a public area is somehow against the law or immoral. And so I don't think people understand their rights as individuals and citizens. And filming the cops is absolutely not against the law. And I know you and I really don't care much for the law as propositioned by the state. But if you could expound on that a little bit more about how, people don't understand their rights and you can film cops and you don't have to answer questions. If you could expound on that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, no, you're right. A lot of people have misunderstanding. I think it just kind of goes back to just disobeying authority on any level people are hesitant of. But actually, in 2015, Colorado passed a law that fines cops $15,000 if they interfered with citizens filming them. So, by all means, you have every right. And you're right, Trisha. There's such a misconception. Even the public thinks that there's laws to prohibit filming in public. You'll see people on these First Amendment auditor videos, which I'd love to get into here in a second, but you'll see people approach the camera and they're like, "Don't film me. You don't have my permission to film me." And it's just an absolute ignorance of the law. There's no expectation of privacy whatsoever in public. So if you could see it, you could film it. And that includes through fences, that includes with drones. So yeah, and that's exactly what these First Amendment auditors do. And as far as I'm concerned, these people are some of the bravest activists that exist on the planet, because they're actually actively walking up to government buildings and challenging law enforcement. And many of the times, these law enforcement officers don't even know the own laws that they're enforcing. And they try to intimidate. Sometimes, you'll catch an officer who actually understands what's going on. But the majority of the time, you'll see these officers who are majority of the time enforcing their ego rather than the law, and try to intimidate and bully the auditors who have a First Amendment right to audit on public property. And it's exactly what the name suggests. They're auditing to see if these public officials are going to respect their rights or not. And I would say the majority of the time they get 100,000 views on YouTube because these public officials, these police employees, are embarrassing themselves by highlighting and proving that they don't have any concept of majority of the laws that they're enforcing. So it is a conundrum, unfortunately. Mm-hmm.
I found that on a personal level, like having an experience with law enforcement, that I'm actually more knowledgeable on the law than they are, which is quite frightening because they have a badge and a gun. But we talk about these First Amendment auditors, and a lot of people, like if they'll watch the video, they'll say that these people are being agitators or whatever. What is your stance on that? When people, kick back and say, well, why are you fighting the police? Why are you filming them? You don't have any place to do this. They're just serving a purpose and doing a job. What would you say to them?
I would say initially I could kind of understand that viewpoint on the surface level. People want to, and there's a general, talking point that police have a tough job, right? And that they don't need people making it any more difficult, and that police should be respected. I mean, those are two things in society that we hear all the time.
Why do you disagree?
I believe these people are making sure, as the name says, they're auditors. These are the people that are making sure that law enforcement, that police employees are respecting our rights. They're not violating our rights, that they know the laws. These people are, to an extent, policing the police. And they just happen to have a video camera, to document it, which, again, is something that's very important. And, the best part about this is that they have financial incentive to be doing this as well, because they get millions of views a lot of times if it's a very viral interaction. And through the YouTube monetization factor, they could make a hefty living filming cops. But it can be a lucrative business if you know how to interact with police. And some of the best auditors, I would say, Amagansett Press is probably one of the best ones. San Joaquin Valley Transparency. They're not trying to goad the police. They're not trying to, incite any type of negative interaction. They let the police do that for themselves. And look, some of these videos of police actually acting in the correct fashion, in the right manner, some of those videos actually go more viral than the ones of them acting like jackasses or trying to get confrontational.
Yeah, so that actually comes around to my point of pragmatism, which I do believe, I know you're an anarchist. Yes. Are you?
Yeah, yes, of course.
As well am I. But I also live in the world we live in. And so I understand that right now that the police have a monopoly on force. And so the best we can do is try to make them accountable in their positions. And body cameras are like a huge point of argument for people. And it seems that most cops turn off their body cameras when they should be on. And I think that some people have proposed ideas that, if your body camera footage isn't available, then you should be punished. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, you're right. This is a very conflicting topic among the police accountability and even libertarians, maybe some people on the left. people should not view body cameras as a fix-all. If anything, they're a Band-Aid. But just like a dash cam, it serves a purpose. It documents and it provides a level of transparency, which is important. However, as you've explained, cops have notoriously turned off their body cameras or obstructed them in crucial times. And majority of the time when that happens, the superiors just put their hands up and they're like, well, whoops, that's just part of what happens in police work. I've proposed, and some of these solutions are mine, some of these aren't mine, but body cameras are activated once they're outside of a police car or police department via NFC tags. That would be one way to make sure that they're constantly streaming. Of course, there runs into some privacy issues. People always want to object, like, well, what if they're going to the restroom or whatever? Of course, there's going to be some of these, issues that there had to be ironed out and fixed. Not claiming to have all the answers, but I'm just saying these are possible solutions. And another one too is that we don't ever get to see the body camera footage once it's saved. Sometimes it's actually never produced. Sometimes it's only produced a year later. Sometimes it's only produced for the family and the lawyers and not made public. So to me, it makes sense for body camera footage to be live streamed 24/7, 365 days a year to public servers. Of course, that's going to cost some money. Yes, I get it. Police have budgets. Obviously, body cameras aren't free. Those cost money as well. But look, these are our tax dollars that are involuntarily extracted from us. At the very least, we should be able to see what our tax dollars are doing, right? That we should have a way to access and pay attention to what they're up to, if they're up to something nefarious, if they're actually helping people. I mean, could you imagine the level of transparency if we could literally type a few, keywords in and see what our local police are doing at that moment? Again, there's privacy issues involved with that. I don't have all the answers, but it seems to make a hell of a lot more sense than waiting for police to use their own discretion as to when to release the body camera footage.
Well, how dare you actually expect people that are living off of your dime to be accountable for their time and action? How dare you?
Yeah, I know, right? We always expect that from the market.
Yeah, it's funny how cops have this, they have some sort of special privilege that other people don't, They become different citizens than we are. Body cams, actually, there was a case recently in Ohio where they finally actually published the body cam video and the cop got indicted. I don't know what's going to happen with it because obviously, he might get off like most cops do, but he shot the dude for no reason. And so I think that personally, I think if a cop turns off his body cam, that should be an actionable offense. Like if you turn off your body cam and you don't have footage, then you should pay the price for it because we're working for the public. And so if you can't account for your time, then you need to own up to it and suffer the consequences. That's my personal view of that. So there's a lot of other things. Like I know that you guys post a lot of videos of police brutality and stuff, but there's other things you posted which I think are really interesting because I think they're real life solutions. And one of those was liability insurance. So if you could expound on that, how that would work in helping police themselves.
Yeah, so it's a concept in theory and actually being implemented in a few places. I believe Minneapolis, since at least 2015 or so, has put it into place. But yeah, it's a theory basically that insurance companies would have a better, be more effective at regulating and thwarting police violence by looking at disciplinary records, looking at reputation, looking at previous violations of the law, basically just doing what insurance companies normally do, but in the sense of insuring law enforcement officers. And it's really not that unheard of. There's other industries that require individual liability insurance. So in this case, the taxpayer would be let off the hook. As of right now, cities spend millions and millions of dollars for police accountability settlements, and it comes out of the taxpayers' dollar. So that's a big problem because it doesn't provide any incentive for accountability. It doesn't provide any incentive for police to not act in a way that they know they're not going to be liable. And this actually comes back to the whole public police issue and problem that we at Police the Police try to focus on, because as libertarians, that is the biggest focus that we should be pointing at when we talk about police accountability.
So basically what it is making the police be accountable for their actions through the free market. It's basically saying if you do something that is immoral or unright or breaking a contract, then we have the right to sue you personally and take that back from you. Is that close?
Correct.
To what
yeah, and if an officer has too many violations, if he's too many strikes on the disciplinary record, he can be uninsurable, therefore not hireable by the departments. So there's quite a few. And to correct you, I mean, if it's something that is state sanctioned, if it's a law that's mandatory for law enforcement agencies to implement, then it's not 100% a free market solution, but it's more headed in that direction. Whereas, as I was saying, like the insurance companies would have the power to pick and choose which officers that they would want to insure, and leave some of that heavy lifting rather than the department making those choices when there's already pre-existing favoritism and bias involved with individual officers and their superiors. Rather than leaving it to that mechanism, we would actually allow the insurance companies. And I get it, the flip side, and I always want to focus on the flip side. The flip side is that sometimes insurance companies can be a little shady. And but I think
I'm a licensed insurance agent. I am an insurance agent. I get that all day long.
Right. So it's not a perfect solution, but I think again this is a step in the right direction. And there's 100 of these types of solutions that could be bound by the state, that could be legislated, but I don't know if that's necessarily what we want to talk about, and I personally, I mean, I feel like there's a demographic for each of the solutions that I talk about, and it just depends on like how far down the rabbit hole you've kind of evolved to when it comes to free market anarchism and private companies and whatnot, But I think as far as talking to normies and just trying to get on their radar with possible police solutions that they could advocate for, I think individual liability insurance is one of the most important ones.
No, I quite agree. And then I'm going to keep going down these points of accountability, because a lot of people are talking about something called qualified immunity. And maybe people don't even know what the hell that is. So if you could explain how the police have qualified immunity, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, this is probably one topic that I'm not as well versed on, which I probably should be. But I believe it was in the late 2000s, maybe 2010, the courts basically assigned individual, not individual liability insurance, but qualified immunity, And that obviously, what we've seen time and time after again is basically a blank check for law enforcement officers to act however they want. And I say that it's a broad take on it, but it's more or less the truth, because when a monopoly claims to be the only entity to have a legal use of force, it kind of blurs the lines. It's so arbitrary that the rules that they purport to follow are changed upon a whim. They're usually vaguely worded. so they could side with their own actors. So it tends to be this discretion, once again, with the courts. And this is the problem, is that the state is a monopoly. So they're a monopoly of law enforcement, but they're also a monopoly of law. And if they're the final arbiter in all cases of conflict, including conflicts that involve their own actors, then there's zero incentive to ever be fair or rational or just. So I think that's more or less what it comes down to. Is it's just kind of like an umbrella term that the courts could use to get law enforcement officers away from charges if they feel like they were using the force or whatever the action is that they are being accused of, if they were doing it within the legal scope of being a law enforcement agent officer.
No, I definitely I agree with your point, and I think it's basically like a way for police to never be held accountable for anything. It's like the worst form of police accountability. And I think about the George Floyd case right now, which is in court right now, and Derek Chauvin, I believe, will be sheltered because of qualified immunity. Even if they charged him and whatever, I just feel like this case will be tried on the fact that he's a police officer and is able to do what he wants to do. And George Floyd died at his knee, and it doesn't really fucking matter. What do you think about this case? Like it's ongoing right now.
Right. Yeah. It's 3 days old. It's there's a lot at stake, right? I think they know that there's going to be some serious backlash and unrest if they don't hold them accountable. After we saw, a whole summer worth of protests, I think the defense at this point, their strongest angle is probably the whole, overdosing. Right. Yeah. And from what I could tell, I mean, I've done research on this quite a bit, and that's not the case. Yes, he had fentanyl in his system, but from what I could tell from a few different reports was that it was asphyxiation. So it's I don't think it's going to hold up. And I think more or less what the George Floyd case represents was a boiling point within the American public, having enough of seeing these types of incidences and seeing these types of viral videos of brutality over and over again. And everybody has their own theory, right? So, I mean, our conspiracy friends, they're claiming that it was all set up and it's all staged actors. And our friends on the right, right. Our friends on the right are claiming that, the police are innocent and it was just drugs, and that this is all just Soros and BLM causing unrest to usher in socialism. And I don't know, man. I mean, look, I've been doing this for how many years now, and I could tell you, we've put out viral video after viral video, and at some point, people have to say, okay, enough's enough. And they might not know exactly what to do about it. They might take to the streets and protest and feel like they've done their duty. But one way or another, I think that's what it was an expression of. It was just frustration and people coming to their boiling point.
You bring up a really good point, Jason, because people can say whatever they want and they can take sides and fall on the left or right or whatever. But, I followed you for a long time. I really just appreciated what you did, which is why originally we became friends, because I don't think people understand how much this happens. I don't think people have a really good grasp on the fact that the police are a predator on society. And if they could just watch your site, if they could just watch videos, they would understand this is not okay. And this happens regularly. This is not something that's some weird happenstance that you have to argue against or favor the police. It's just the norm for the police because they have a monopoly on force.
Yes, it's it's not an isolated incident, as they call it. It's a regular occurrence. It's so regular that sometimes I wonder if we're doing a disservice to the police accountability movement by highlighting these stories on a daily basis, potentially desensitizing people. But you're right. It only seems to be getting worse. On on average, police kill 1,000 Americans every year. I usually say, America's civilized country with uncivilized police. And this is exactly why, because other countries, of course, aren't the same size of the United States, but the deaths, the lethal use of force is considerably lower. So, there's a serious issue, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better. And as I was mentioning, it seems to be one of those things where, okay, a big incident happens, the Mike Brown, Terrence Clutcher. I mean, there'll be protests, and it'll last a good month or two. People are pissed off, but the long-term effects of trying to make legitimate change usually devolves to apathy. And most of the time people kind of lose interest. They hear that their legislators are creating some type of legislation to, thwart police violence or whatever. 9 times out of 10, those either get watered down or never end up passing. And people continue to ask for reform, through political means. Mm-hmm. I've been seeing this my entire life. And in some ways, like maybe, our conspiracy theorist friends had a point that it was co-opted, the whole movement after George Floyd was killed. Because look, if you're just going to keep suggesting that there needs to be political reform over and over again, then, hey, look, nothing's ever going to change, and police are going to continue to do what they do. And the entire system is going to continue to keep making money. And, we're going to continue to keep putting people in prisons. And mind you, the U.S. has the biggest prison population in the entire world. So this is big business, and as far as I'm concerned, these people aren't serious about actually making change. A lot of these people either are misguided, misdirected, or just virtue signaling, and should know better. Our friends who are anarchists on the left should know better. And, they continue to present the same solutions over and over again. As far as I'm concerned, it should not be defund the police. It should be decentralize the police. That's the solution.
No, I quite agree, which is why I'm a big fan of the 10th Amendment Center, because, we have a state. It exists. We're not stupid. We know it's here and we live in it. So if you decentralize and make things local, you can actually affect change. I've actually worked with, jail reform or bail reform and the Cuyahoga County Jail reform position here. And it makes a difference. So like, a lot of people they speak a lot on like disliking the police, a lot of ANCAPs, but they don't understand that it takes actual work to do so. So, and I'm not trying to hate on ANCAPs, but they really annoy me nowadays. Anyways, so we talked about qualified immunity, liability insurance, body cameras. But what do you think is the one biggest thing that can happen to change the police state in the United States today?
Well, I was just touching on it. I think decentralizing is the only legitimate solution. And I think by doing that, we allow communities to voluntarily choose protection and security agencies. And remember, these are going to look a lot different from law enforcement agencies, right? They have a totally different objective. They're not going to be shaking people down for victimless crimes. They're not going to have any incentive to pull you over, ask you where you're going. These people have incentive to try to stay in business. They want to try to please their customer base. So as far as I'm concerned, that is by far the biggest point that we need to get across, especially to our audience. I don't feel like it's talked about enough. I feel like I'm like one of a few people who continue to harp on this subject and continue to point at it as the only legitimate solution, because both the left and the right have no retort to it. I think the right kind of likes the idea just because it's the word privatized, but otherwise, they're mostly a bunch of bootlickers who get a little confused by the concept. But I guess I would have to ask, Trishee, like, are we talking to the general normie when I answer this question? Are we talking to more libertarians? Are we talking to anarchists?
We are on stereo. So the people we are talking to are just regular folk.
Gotcha. So I think individually, some of the most important things you could do is know your rights, teach other people their rights, always film the police. If you're very passionate about keeping police accountable, try to start a cop watch group in your own community. Share any type of police related information on social media, create petitions, create a civilian oversight committee. If there isn't one that already exists in your city, try to speak out at city council meetings. Another one, what we were talking about earlier, is First Amendment audits. Those are probably some of the most effective. Of course, teach your kids their rights as well. That's very important. Kind of on like a larger scale, I would say campaigning to end the drug war. The drug war has been a disaster for 40 plus years now, a complete abject failure, and it's a cash cow. You know, they don't have incentive to end it on the federal level. So luckily, we're seeing some states kind of chipping away slowly at repealing some drug prohibition laws. But I would also say demoting and removing violent cops. A lot of times these people get a pass. They'll either get a slap on the wrist with a 2-week paid vacation and then get right back on, or they'll actually be fired from the department and move to a different department down the road, which also brings to another solution, which we should be creating a national blacklist of bad cops, right? Yes. Like this is something that should be done on the federal level. This should have been done since the 80s and beyond, even before that. And the fact that, the feds haven't been monitoring this or keeping any type of legitimate track of it just shows, how incompetent they are and how little they actually care about the safety of the citizens. Another one I would say, and I know this probably rubs some people the wrong way, but regular psych evaluations and drug tests. And, I'm right there. I don't believe any drugs should be illegal. I believe all drugs should be legal. But if these people are taking a paycheck to enforce victimless laws like drug laws, then they should be abiding by the same laws as well. And I don't want to deal with some roided out dickhead, So that seems to make sense. And we actually covered a gentleman, an officer, about 2 months ago. God, what was his name? It was an officer who, on his very last day of his duty, walked outside of his police department and shot himself and killed himself. And he left 3 videos before he killed himself. And one of the things that he had mentioned was that regular psych evaluations are one of the most important things that law enforcement officers can do. And I don't believe there's enough of that. I don't believe they have enough support when it comes to their own mental health. And a lot of these people have their own issues, their own PTSD, their own traumas, and without addressing them and getting them help for it, oftentimes those issues are transferred over to the public in various forms of brutality and violence. I could keep going. I mean, you want me to keep going?
Oh, keep going. I'm actually really enjoying it. Yeah, keep going.
We talked about reviewing the failed body camera policies. I think that's something that needs to be updated. Unfortunately, there's still plenty of departments across the country that don't even have body cameras yet. And that's, unacceptable. There's really no logical excuse for it. They often blame funding. But there also needs to not only be body cameras at every department, but I think nationally there needs to be, if we're going to use the state in the right manner, there needs to be some kind of discretion, perhaps regulation as to valid body camera policies that actually work for the people rather than against them. I would say prioritizing non-lethal ways to arrest suspects. This is a big one, right? Because we often see people who are armed with something as insignificant as like a stick or a broom. And because those are classified as threats to law enforcement, if an individual approaches law enforcement, they are often justified legally in their lethal use of force. So as far as I'm concerned, there's other ways to address mentally people who are dealing with mental issues. And our friend Dale Brown at the Detroit Threat Management Center is a perfect person to highlight some of those techniques. This guy, he's been since the late 90s focused on nonviolent solutions to dealing with predators, criminals in his community. And if any of your listeners are interested in this topic whatsoever, just YouTube Dale Brown Threat Management Center. And there's been quite a few documentaries by Reason, by Vice, by Cop Block. And they really explain what this guy is all about. Like, this guy is the shining example for what privatized security companies could be. And I don't feel like, again, he gets enough credit within our movement, our community. But I really do feel like that's one of the most important things that we could do, because if you're mentally ill, you have 16 times more of a chance to be killed by law enforcement. 16 times more likely. And
that's insane.
As far as I'm concerned, yeah, like in 20 or 30 years, we're going to look back at all these people that cops killed that were going through a mental episode that could have been easily de-escalated, but because of their training, because, you know, they're trained, if somebody is coming at you aggressively and they happen to have like a stick in their hand, something as, you know, non-lethal as a stick, that you're legally justified to put bullets into them and kill them, you know. So this really needs to be revised. And unfortunately, I don't see much of a national talking point about something like this, as there probably should be by Black Lives Matter or other police accountability activists. But if we were going to revamp and rehaul the entire institution of law enforcement, that seems to be one that really needs to be addressed.
No, I think you make a great point, Jason, because a lot of people, like, they'll say defund the police, do this and that, but they don't really have a clear plan.
Right.
And so, what if we were to defund the police? What would you think that would look like in a libertarian, world?
Well, I mean, I get the calls to defund. I mean, the imagery of militarized police. I mean, it's intimidating, right? It creates a divide amongst the public and law enforcement. And I get why people would want to defund it. And ultimately, it's not the worst idea. It's short-sighted in many ways, and it became a rally cry. But I believe in a libertarian society, that would be, well, are we talking libertarian, or are we talking like a truly like voluntarist society? Because I mean, if we're talking like a minarchist society, then that's maybe a little different.
Well, here's the thing. I'm a voluntarist and I live in a real world. So I need to know about real world solutions. So give me some.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Well, I mean, the budgets that police have are so bloated anyway, right? Like I just made a meme a couple of days ago that police were actually diverting, governors and city officials were actually diverting COVID funds towards the police department's funds. So, I mean, and I think one of them in Chicago was like $235 million. I mean, it was a lot of money, and it's significant. And it's funny because, ironically, this is after a whole summer of people, calling for defunding the police, and it was just the opposite. And they've gotten all this money through COVID funding, and nobody says a word, But I would say that is one of the many problems of the tax racket-based law enforcement system that we have now, because there is really no way to quantify if law enforcement is using the money effectively or efficiently. If we were paying voluntarily, that would be a different matter. But what tends to happen is, if there is some type of problem or troublemaker, let's say, within the department, they will get more money thrown at it rather than trying to address the situation. So that tends to, compound the problem and then bloat the budgets, and that tends to be the solution in most government, with problems, is just throw money at it.
Well, because we are both like free market people, I don't think a lot of people understand like defund the police and free market. They can go hand in hand. And so I don't think a lot of people understand that police have the monopoly on violence. Like,
Yes.
yes. And that's really important because, we can talk about all these solutions, but they won't be implemented because the police have a monopoly on violence. And so what is that, if you could expound on that?
Yeah, so law enforcement in the United States claims a legal monopoly on the use of force and also being a legal monopoly on law enforcement. So that's a big problem. That means that there's only one entity that gets to dictate, their own policies, that gets to run rampant in the face of accountability, has no incentive to be efficient, to be effective, or to ever change. And I think that's what you're kind of addressing here, is that none of these things are feasible unless we beg hard enough for our masters to change them, right? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, a lot of these changes have to come through legislation. And while police are continuously funded by taxation, and taxation, let me remind you, is not voluntary. I mean, they might claim it is on its face, but it's not. These are extracted tax dollars that fund a legal racket, more or less, which extorts our money through revenue generation for victimless crimes. And there's three reasons why government will always abuse the service of protection and security. The government has a monopoly, therefore, whatever injustice they commit, there's no way to choose another provider or to hold them accountable. We can't pick and choose, just like we would with a cell phone company. If a cell phone company were to screw us over somehow, overcharge us, heaven forbid, beat us over the head with a billy club during a protest or something, we could very easily vote with our dollar, vote with our lifestyle, and choose to allocate our money towards a different provider. So when taxes are forced, the consumer has basically like no way to stop paying for its service, even if it's unsatisfactory, even if they're unaccountable. So what tends to happen is that these services deviate from their so-called original intentions, and oftentimes become less efficient, less effective, kind of play by their own rules, have their own double standards, because ultimately they're not motivated by pleasing their customers to increase the profit like a free market entity would be. So, they're motivated by how many tickets they could write to increase revenue. And I know that a lot of times people want to think of the quota system as a myth, but it's very real. We've covered it multiple times. We've done podcasts with law enforcement officers. These quotas exist. Cops are oftentimes pulling people over, like I was saying, for victimless infractions and extorting them. And that hurts the working class. And once again, those just wouldn't exist in a voluntarily funded, decentralized community who gets to pick and choose who their providers are for security and protection services.
So, Jason, you've actually explained really well about police accountability and how it would work in our society. I want to know, so you see every day with what you do, like horrible examples of police misconduct. Like, as of late, what's the worst thing that you've seen that you have to post?
Oh man, I hate this question because
sorry,
honestly, no, it's okay. No. Oh, I'll just explain why, because there's no possible way I could remember everything. And it's like almost on a weekly basis, we're covering a new story that it's like, holy shit, this is the worst thing I've ever heard.
To be honest, I just get angry all the time. But.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's been so many over the years, and it's hard to really say like which ones are the worst. I mean, there's been kids shot and killed. There's been, grandparents shot and killed, wrong address, no-knock raids. I mean, there's just so many to really be able to keep in the back of my mind to address. But there was one that we covered just this morning, which I was kind of thinking about when I knew we were going to have this conversation, because it really highlights the level of incompetency among law enforcement And let me just remind you, in 2000, the U.S. courts actually said it was okay for police to hire somebody who is too smart. So somebody actually tested too high with their IQ level back in 2000 and actually put in a lawsuit because they weren't hired because they were just too smart for the job.
Yes.
But I guess last month in the city of Compton, California, there was like an unlawful stop for alleged illegal parking, which basically ended up with a cop shooting 8 rounds at a fleeing vehicle into traffic, which is pretty crazy. Yeah, so definitely go to the Free Thought Project, check that article out. But basically the story goes is that this dude was waiting, double parked for his mom to get some Chinese food. And, he wasn't actually parked. He had his foot on the brake. I mean, there's no crime. He wasn't out of his vehicle at all. But law enforcement officers approached him and basically just started barking orders at him, rolled down his window. He tried to respond and be like rational and tell the police that, he was just waiting for his mom. But of course they started, barking. He was illegally parked. He wasn't illegally parked. He was just waiting there. And then of course they started talking about other victimless infractions. I guess they noticed that he had tinted windows. So they started harassing him about that. And just like anybody in their right mind, and I know this probably sounds counterintuitive, but he left. He decided to just flee the scene, and he didn't want to be harassed or extorted by these people. He was doing nothing wrong. He had harmed nobody. And he decided to make probably the bad decision to flee. But as he was fleeing, the officer decided to pull out his gun and dump 8 rounds at the fleeing car during a very busy time of the day and traffic surrounding him. Luckily, nobody was shot or killed. But I mean, it's just absolutely crazy. It's like, how does this stuff get like how is this okay? Like, how do people ignore these types of cases, these types of, I mean, there's even video of the whole incident of body cam. So, I mean, to me, it's like, the people on the right, the bootlickers, have no problems ignoring situations like these where it's such a prevalent, I mean, we cover stories like this all the time, cops losing their guns. I mean, these people have zero incentive to be, safe, to be rational. And it shows, it shows.
No, it's true. And if anybody follows you, by the way, Jason is a co-founder of the Free Thought Project. So follow that as well. And we'll go over that at the end. But, you can say something is just a weird mishap or whatever, but these things happen over and over. You can watch videos over and over every day being posted and stories being posted. This is not uncommon. The police, they act horribly all the time. And I don't think people understand that. They think it's like some weird sort of like, oh, well, that wouldn't have happened if the cop did this. Or I see people comment and they say, well, can I see the video beforehand? It's like, could you maybe stop defending these people that have a monopoly on force and maybe understand that they're in the wrong? I don't really think that's hard to consider, but apparently it is for a lot of people. Yeah.
Well, a lot of people have been indoctrinated their entire lives to believe that these people are heroes. And and even beyond that, a lot of times people can't envision a life without police, and therefore they're they're incapable of envisioning that. They think that there would just be nothing. They can't actually envision that there would be these companies that would fill their place, that the market would actually produce a substantial.
I always say I don't think a lot of people are really angry with homicide detectives. I really don't think they are. I think they're more angry with traffic cops, and rightfully so. Right. So let's just be a little bit reasonable about it. Okay, so Jason, where can people find you? Where can they follow you? I know that you've been quieted by the social media giants, but where can they find you?
Well, we're on 15 different social media platforms. We post on each one. We post on each one every day. I guess it depends on if you want to follow me, if you want to follow the Free Thought Project, if you want to follow Police the Police. But generally, if you type in Police the Police, the Free Thought Project, or Jason Bassler on Twitter, MeWe, Facebook, Instagram, Minds, Float, Tumblr, Telegram. Yeah, I mean, we're literally on all of them. I know Tumblr. That one's always kind of embarrassing to say, but
How is that
we're not.
thing?
We're not trying to be censored. We're trying to get our information out there far and wide. And as far as I'm concerned, this is one of the best strategies we could do, is to not put all of our eggs in one basket. We've already made that mistake once. But otherwise, the Free Thought Project .com. We also have our podcast on Podbean, Apple, Spotify. We have our newsletter. We send out an email every single day. So yeah, please, we need your support.
Yeah, sign up for their email. Sign up for stuff. If you don't like ads, like, just sign up and support them. Like, seriously, it's not that hard, people.
Jason, we need it.
Thank you. I'm really tired and old, and I have a child, so I wanted to focus a little more. But you gave some great answers and solutions. I think a lot of the times people talk about, police accountability, and they don't have any real solutions. And you guys do good work and have great ideas. So I think definitely follow them and learn. I think libertarian ideas on police accountability are probably the best out there. So
thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
Same to you, Trisha. Thank you.
Good night.